Welcome back to the South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans, for Ohio State fans. For the West Coast, I'm your host, Zach Moore. Today is Sunday, January 18th, 2026, and thank you for joining me while I talk to myself about the first few weeks of the offseason for our beloved Buckeyes. As we're all painfully aware, the 2025 season came to a screeching halt in the Cotton Bowl on New Year's Eve. The Buckeyes were 24-14 losers to the Miami Hurricanes in that game. A sluggish start and some dreadful play by the Ohio State offensive line doomed the Buckeyes in that game. But hey, count me as a fan who thought 2025 was a pretty damn good follow-up to a national championship, a 12-0 regular season, and a first-round bye in the college football playoff. Ryan Day gets the Michigan monkey off his back. We were treated to a generationally great defense. We watched a budding star and quarterback Julian Sayin lead the country in completion percentage and go to New York as a Heisman finalist. And look, the Buckeyes' only losses were narrow defeats to the two teams that are going to be playing for the national championship tomorrow night. Tomorrow night, the Hoosiers are going to be putting the finishing touches, I believe, on arguably the greatest single season in college football history. I think you can easily say it's the greatest single season in college football since 2019, the 2019 LSU Tigers, that is, with Joe Burrow. And the Buckeyes lost to that Hoosier team by a field goal in front of a pro-IU crowd in Lucas Oil Stadium. What are you going to do? Sometimes you just lose to other good teams. You can probably say the same of the loss to Miami in the Cotton Bowl as well. They were a tough matchup for the Buckeyes. In the end, the Buckeyes were just a little too green at quarterback and not quite good enough on the offensive line to repeat as national champions. As good as he was for most of the season, Indiana and Miami were able to force Julian Sayin into some critical mistakes. Sayin threw that devastating pick six against the Canes, and his first quarter interception against the Hoosiers led to an IU field goal that loomed, pretty large in a 3-point loss. And there were several instances in both of those games in which Sayin had open receivers downfield for big plays, and he just didn't see them. And of course, he was sacked a whopping 10 times against IU and Miami combined. You're not going to win many postseason games when you got that much working against you. I also can't help but wonder if the Buckeyes would still be playing if they had brought in another seasoned play caller to replace Chip Kelly instead of elevating Brian Hartline to OC. Look, Ryan Day was in an impossible situation last offseason. Hartline probably walks if he isn't promoted, and that might have meant Jeremiah Smith and or Carnell Tate walk along with him. But I don't think we can say Hartline did anything to really elevate the offense last season as a coordinator, and accepting the South Florida head coaching job as the Buckeyes were preparing to play for the Big Ten championship proved to be pretty disruptive to Ohio State's fortunes in the postseason. Lastly, I think we can say, with the benefit of hindsight, an underwhelming 2025 transfer portal class also didn't help matters. Of the 11 players Ohio State plucked from the portal last offseason, only tight end Max Clare and right tackle Phillip Daniels were truly impactful for the Buckeyes last season. The Buckeyes invested a lot of money in Rice transfer Ethan Onyanwa to be the starting left tackle, and he turned out to be pretty much unplayable. You could argue if Onyanwa had been the stalwart at left tackle that most of us had expected, the Buckeyes might still be playing and would have a chance at repeating as national champions tomorrow night in Miami. I really think Onyanwa was that big of a whiff by the Ohio State coaching staff. So a lot conspired, I think, to derail Ohio State's national title hopes in the postseason, even though they had quite a lot going for them during the regular season. Still, on balance, a really good follow-up, as I said, to a national championship season, 12-0 regular season, and a first-round bye in the playoff. Now, the Buckeyes are going to lose 7 players from the defense that started against the Hurricanes in the Cotton Bowl. Caleb Downs, Arvell Reese, and Cade McDonald are leaving early for the NFL. No surprise there. That's what everyone expected. And Sonny Styles, Caden Curry, Davison Igbinosun, and Lorenzo Styles Jr. are out of eligibility. Now, the good news is defensive end Kenyatta Jackson, defensive tackle Edric Houston, safety Jalen McClain, and cornerback Jermaine Matthews will all return for the 2026 season. On offense, the Buckeyes are only going to lose 3 players who started the Cotton Bowl: receiver Carnell Tate and tight ends Max Clare and Will Kazmarek. Everyone else is back, including quarterback Julian Sayin, the Heisman finalist, Jeremiah Smith, the best receiver in college football, and budding star running back Bo Jackson. And 4 or 5 starters on the offensive line will also return: left tackle Austin Sareveld, right tackle Philip Daniels, right guard Gabe Van Sickle, left guard Luke Montgomery, and center Carson Hinsman. The Buckeyes will also be getting reserve left tackle Ian Moore and reserve center guard Josh Padilla back as well. I think Moore is likely your starting left tackle for the Buckeyes in 2026, and Padilla could end up being a starter as well. I mean, I thought they both played really well against the Hurricanes, and they're clearly ready for bigger roles this season. Finally, the Buckeyes are getting what I believe to be an immediate impact player in freshman receiver Chris Henry Jr. from their 28-player 2026 recruiting class. Now, it has been a very interesting offseason so far for the program in the transfer portal, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the 34 outgoing transfers, 29 of which I believe are scholarship players. And for the first time in the transfer portal era, the Buckeyes suffered what most of us would consider a significant handful of regrettable losses. Players that figured to crack the 2 deep this season and who the coaching staff was banking on in 2026 and beyond. And those players are receivers Mylan Graham and Quincy Porter, who both transferred to Notre Dame, defensive tackle Jarquez Carter, who transferred to Miami, quarterbacks Aaron Scott Jr. and Bryce West, who transferred to Oregon and Wisconsin respectively, and safety Fahim Delane, who transferred to LSU. Graham, Porter, Scott Jr., and Delane were all top 100 players in their respective classes and figured to get significant playing time for the Buckeyes in 2026. Those losses really stung, I thought, and it was tough to see them walk out the door. Now, it took about 10 days for Ryan Day and his staff to begin addressing those losses through the transfer portal, but in the end, I thought they put together an excellent 16-player portal class, though we won't know for sure until they start playing real games. Now, of those 16 players, 8 are defensive players, 6 are offensive players, and 2 are specialists. That's place kicker Connor Hawkins from Baylor and long snapper Dalton Riggs from UCF. Now, for what it's worth, 24/7 Sports has this Buckeye portal class ranked number 4 in the country in their team transfer rankings, behind LSU, Ole Miss, and Texas. So not too bad, not too shabby. Now, what the Buckeyes lost in the portal in youth and raw talent, they replaced with veteran experience in production. They added 2 7th-year players, 4 5th-year players, 8 4th-year players, 1 3rd-year player, and 1 2nd-year player. And the majority of that group come from other Power 4 programs, including 6 from the SEC, 3 from the Big Ten, 3 from the Big 12, and 2 from the ACC. Now, this comes from Tony Gerdeman of Buckeye Huddle today on X, comparing what the Buckeyes lost in production from the players who just transferred out to what they're gaining from the 16 players who are transferring in. The outgoing players combined for 32 starts. The group coming in has combined for 147 starts. The outgoing transfers accounted for a total of 111 tackles, but the players coming in have accounted for 473. The outgoing players accounted for 7 tackles for loss. The incoming players have combined for 44.5 tackles for loss. The outgoing transfers accounted for 3 career sacks, but the incoming group has accounted for 16. The Buckeyes lost 45 combined receptions to the group that just went out, but they're gaining 245 from the group coming in. They lost 469 combined receiving yards in the outgoing players, but they're gaining 2,749 receiving yards in the 4 pass catchers who are transferring in. Finally, the players who just transferred out for the Buckeyes combined for only 8 career touchdowns, while the players transferring in have combined for 35. Not too shabby when you're gaining that much production from 16 players transferring in compared to, what did I say, 30 some odd players transferring out. Now, in our limited time here today, I'm not going to talk about every one of the 16 incoming transfers, but I do want to focus on 5 defensive players from that group, because let's face it, that's where Ohio State that's where they have to replace most of their outgoing production, is on the defensive side of the ball. I'm going to focus on 5 incoming transfers from the defensive side that I think are going to have the best chance at making an immediate impact for the Buckeyes and potentially start. Let's begin with safety Earl Little, the Florida State transfer. Little began his career at Alabama, but spent the last 2 seasons at Florida State. He's logged 874 career snaps. 674 of those snaps came last season. So 2025 was his only season playing starter-level snaps. Little was named a captain for the Seminoles last season, and he led them in tackles with 76 and INTs with 4. Little was named second team All-ACC last season for his play. Now, of his 674 snaps last season, 226 were played in the box, 376 of those were at free safety, and 65 were in the slot. Little was pretty good in coverage last season for the Seminoles. He finished the season with a very respectable PFF coverage grade of 71.6. Now, a lot of folks believe that Little will be Lorenzo Styles Jr.'s replacement at slot corner, but he has the versatility to play either safety spot. Little's going to be a senior in 2026, and this will be his final year of eligibility. The next player I want to mention is also a safety. That's Terry Moore, the Duke transfer. Moore missed the entire 2025 season recovering from an ACL injury, but he had a monster 2024 for the Blue Devils. He was 4th on the team in tackles with 71 in 2024. He also led them in interceptions with 4 and was named second team All-ACC in 2024. And Moore's PFF grades from that season were excellent. 90.1 overall, 81.7 against the run, and 89.2 in coverage. Of the 744 snaps he logged in the 2024 season, 174 were in the box, 379 were at free safety, and 155 were in the slot. So Moore, like Little Jr., a very versatile player. Many believe that Moore will be Caleb Downs' replacement in the 2026 Ohio State defense. Now, look, there's no replacing a generational talent like Downs, but you could do a lot worse than Moore, assuming, of course, he's fully recovered from his ACL injury. Moore has 1,171 career snaps, and again, like Little, he'll be a senior with 1 year of eligibility remaining. With Little Jr., Moore, and Jalen McClain returning, I think the back end of the Ohio State defense has a chance to be really, really good in 2026. McClain is coming off an excellent sophomore season in which he led the Buckeyes in snaps with 708. He finished with 53 tackles, and his PFF grades were outstanding. 79.2 overall, 77.6 against the run, 87 in tackling, which was second only to Sonny Styles, and 78.9 in coverage. I think McClain has first team all Big Ten potential in 2026. I'm expecting a big leap for him going into next season. And I think when you couple him with Little Jr. and Moore, Ohio State could have a very special secondary in 2026. The next player I want to talk about is defensive tackle John Walker, the UCF transfer. Walker is a former 4-star recruit who actually had an Ohio State offer coming out of high school. He saw a lot of action as a freshman for the Knights in 2023, 389 snaps, but missed the entire 2024 season with a leg injury. In 495 snaps last season, Walker finished with a solid overall PFF grade of 70.7 and an excellent PFF grade against the run of 79. Playing mostly at the 3-tech, Walker finished last season with 40 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, which included 1 sack, and 10 quarterback pressures. At 6'4", 324 pounds, Walker is likely the replacement for Caden McDonald at nose tackle. Now, Walker only has 87 career snaps at nose tackle, but he certainly has the size and the talent to play there. I got to say, I'm pretty bullish on the combination of Walker and Edric Houston in the middle of the Buckeye defensive line. Now, I don't know that they're going to be as good on the interior as they were last season with Caden McDonald, but I think this is still going to be an area of strength for the Buckeye defense in 2026. I think the combination of Walker and Houston could be pretty special. Now, Houston was slowed by a training camp injury most of last season. I talked about it all, throughout this podcast during the year. But I thought Houston played probably his best 2 games of the season against Indiana and Miami. He finished with 1.5 sacks against the Canes. I'm expecting a big leap from Houston in year 3, and I'm on the lookout for a really good season from Walker and Houston on the interior of the Ohio State defense. The next incoming transfer I want to talk about is linebacker Christian Allegro from Wisconsin. In 3 seasons at Wisconsin, Allegro had 120 tackles and 14 tackles for loss, which includes 8 sacks. Allegro has 11 career starts and 881 snaps under his belt. He can play the mic and the will. At 6'4", 247 pounds, Allegro's PFF grades, they don't really jump out at you, except for one area, which is pass rush. Allegro finished 2025 with a PFF pass rush grade of 81.2. And that makes me wonder if Matt Patricia might have a special role for Allegro in the Ohio State defense in 2026. It's interesting, in only 39 pass rush snaps last season, Allegro finished with 10 quarterback pressures and 4 sacks. Seems like he was underutilized by Wisconsin in that area. Now, in last season's game against the Buckeyes, Allegro finished with 2 tackles for loss. He actually broke his arm in the first half of that game, but continued to play with a club on his arm in the second half. Man, I love that story about Allegro. No, I don't see Allegro playing 650 snaps like Sonny Styles, but I could see him starting alongside Peyton Pierce, at least to begin the season. And I think he's going to play a lot as part of a 3-man rotation. That's also likely to include sophomore Riley Pettijohn. The Buckeyes, look, they're losing 2 first-round draft picks in Styles and Arvell Reese from this room, so I think it would be unrealistic not to expect some level of drop-off from this group. But I think Pierce, Allegro, and Pettijohn have a chance to still be a very, very good linebacker group for the Buckeyes. I think they'll be far from a weakness. And I think they could be a relative strength for this Ohio State defense. Again, I'm pretty bullish on the Ohio State linebackers going into next season. The last incoming transfer I want to talk about is edge Quay Rusaw from Alabama. He's a player I'm very excited to watch in 2026. Now, Rusaw at this stage of his career is more potential and upside than proven production. At 6'2", 243 pounds, Rusaw was a top 100 player out of Montgomery, Alabama. 24/7 Sports had him rated the number 64 overall player in the 2023 class. Now, he took a red shirt in 2023, but had a very solid 2024 for the Tide, playing 403 snaps, registering 30 tackles, including 2 tackles for loss, 13 quarterback pressures, 1 sack, and 2 interceptions. And his PFF grades from 2024 are actually very, very good. 71.8 overall and 78 against the run. Rusaw only played 215 snaps last season because of a broken foot that he sustained against Georgia in September. He only played 8 snaps in that game before the injury. He was able to return in time for Bama's postseason, though. Rusaw has 9 career starts and 618 career snaps under his belt. And if you watch his highlights, you can see the raw talent and athleticism. I mean, his abilities, to me, look very similar to those of Arvell Reese. And I'll be very interested to see what Rusaw can do once James Laurinaitis has an opportunity to get his hands on him in Columbus. So keep your eye on Quay Rusaw going into the 2026 season. Okay, that's going to do it for me. Short and sweet. I'm going to have a lot more to say about Ohio State's transfer portal haul in the coming weeks. Little, Moore, Walker, Allegro, and Rusaw are not the only potential high-impact players from this group of transfers. And I'm not entirely sure the Buckeyes are done dealing in the portal just yet. So a lot more to talk about, I'm sure. We've got a long off season to go. Look for another pod from me in the coming weeks. Until then, thanks so much for listening, and go Bucks. You've been listening to The South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast. Follow us on X at South_stands.